Okay, let's dive into this. Picture it. Thursday, June 12th, 2025. Maybe you were online that day. If you were, chances are things felt fundamentally, well, broken.
Yes, that's right.
Maybe you couldn't get Spotify to play anything, your Discord messages just hung there, or sending a Snapchat felt completely impossible. For millions, it really felt like the internet itself was just glitching out massively.
It absolutely created that feeling, that perception of a global issue.
Yeah.
I mean, the number of reports flooding sites like Down Detector was huge.
Huh.
For all these, seemingly unrelated apps,
Yeah.
big popular ones.
Right.
It really gave the impression of a digital blackout. Now, technically, not every single part of the internet went down.
Okay.
But the impact was so concentrated on services people use constantly, day in, day out.
And that feeling, that widespread disruption, that's exactly what we're digging into today. You've shared a whole bunch of articles, reports, detailing what actually happened behind the scenes on that Thursday. So our mission here is to unpack all this material. We want to understand the technical events that caused all that chaos and, get a clearer picture of how incredibly tangled up our digital lives really are.
Yeah, how dependent everything is.
Exactly. And pull out the key insights about this infrastructure we all just rely on every day.
Right. So we'll look at the main culprit, which seems to be a major issue inside Google Cloud Platform. And then there was also this separate but happening at the same time problem over at Cloudflare.
Ah, okay. Two things at once.
Yeah. And we'll trace how that caused this dramatic cascade, this ripple effect that took down so many services people use. And finally, maybe most importantly, what does this all tell us? About the vulnerabilities, but maybe also the resilience of the way the internet is built today.
Okay, good plan. So let's start with that first point. Why did it feel so massive? Like the whole internet just stopped for so many people?
Well, it really comes down to where the problem happened. When you have issues in those core infrastructure services, the ones that lots and lots of other popular apps rely on.
The foundation.
Exactly, the foundations. When that layer shakes, everything built on top feels it instantly and everywhere. So you see tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of reports flying into Down Detector for Spotify, Discord, Snapchat, Gmail, all at once. It's only natural to think, oh crap, the internet is broken, even if technically it's a problem a layer or two deeper.
Right. And the sources you shared point squarely at Google Cloud Platform, GCP, as the primary driver of this cascade. For people who maybe don't think about cloud stuff every day, what exactly is GCP? Why is a glitch there such a catastrophe?
So GCP is it's one of the absolute giants, a foundational pillar for so much of the modern web.
Yeah.
Think massive data centers all over the world providing computing power, storage, databases, networking tools, basically the building blocks.
The Lego bricks for the internet.
Kind of, yeah. And countless businesses, from tiny startups to huge global companies, use these GCP services to build and run their own apps and websites. So in GCP hiccups, it's not just Google stuff that breaks. It can take out a massive chunk of the internet that depends on it.
Okay, that makes the scale clear. So specifically on June 12th, what did Google actually say happened? What was the technical cause according to their reports?
Google's official statement pointed to an invalid automated quota update to our API management system, which was distributed globally.
Right. Invalid automated quota update. Sounds very technical. Can you translate that?
Sure. So think of APIs, application programming interfaces, as the messengers or the phone lines that let different software systems talk to each other. Essential stuff. Google has systems to manage how much traffic or how many requests these APIs can handle from different services. That's the quota management.
Okay, like setting limits.
Exactly. And on June 12th, an automated system, something designed to update these limits, it made a mistake, a big one. It pushed out a bad update that basically told the system, hey, block access for all these legitimate services trying to use these critical APIs. It's like the security system suddenly decided nobody with a valid ID badge was allowed in the building anymore.
Jeez. Okay, so an automated error just locked the doors internally. How long did this mess last, according to the sources?
The reports say it started around 18.49 BST, which is 1.49 p.m. Central Time in the U.S., and Google said they had things fully recovered about 3 hours later, so roughly 21.49 BST or 4.49 p.m. Central.
3 hours. Yeah, like you said, that feels like an absolute age when core services are down.
It really does.
Yeah.
Especially for businesses relying on it.
And how did they fix it? What was the recovery process like?
Well, the material suggests Google's engineers jumped on it pretty fast once they figured out what was happening. Within about 2 hours, they apparently found the specific offending quota check, the bad rule, and put in bypasses in most of their regions to get things flowing again.
Mostly fixed in 2 hours, but full recovery took 3.
Right. because the sources mentioned one specific major region, a central one, had a tougher time recovering. Apparently, an underlying database that handles these quota policies got totally overloaded during the incident itself.
Ah.
So fixing it there was more complicated and took longer.
That detail about Us Central One, it really shows how complex these systems are. Even the fix can hit bottlenecks.
Exactly. It's not just flipping one switch back. Different parts react differently under stress.
So inside Google's own world, what kind of services were actually hit? The sources listed a whole bunch.
Oh yeah, it was wide-ranging within GCP itself. It hit core products, particularly ones tied to their Identity and Access Management System, IAM. The list includes things developers and businesses use heavily: Agent Assist, AI Platform Prediction, AlloDB for databases, Cloud Build, Cloud File Store, App Engine, Firestore, Cloud Functions. A lot of networking stuff too.
So the tools businesses run on.
Pretty much the back-end infrastructure that keeps their online operations going.
But it wasn't just those back-end tools, right? The reports mentioned big impacts on stuff regular users see, like Google Workspace apps.
That's right. The ripple hit things like Gmail, Google Chat, Google Drive, Google Docs. Hugely popular, everyday tools.
Yeah.
People couldn't get their email, couldn't chat, couldn't open or save documents. And interestingly, the sources noted that Google Meet, their video conferencing, its official status page, didn't show a major red alert.
But people were complaining.
Exactly. User reports on Down Detector for Meet spiked massively. So even if the main status page looked okay, users were clearly having widespread problems actually using it.
That's a really important point. The official status versus the actual user experience can diverge quite a bit during these complex outages.
Definitely. It's hard to capture every nuance in real time on a status page.
So what was Google's public response to all this, as reported in the material you looked at?
Well, they expressed deep regret, as you'd expect, acknowledged the impact. They said they were doing a full investigation, a post-mortem, and promised a detailed incident report explaining the root cause and, crucially, the steps they'd take to stop it from happening again.
Okay.
The sources also kind of hinted that internally this was seen as a pretty big blow, a setback for Google Cloud as they're trying to compete harder with AWS and Azure for market share.
Yeah, a very public failure isn't good for business in that space.
Not at all. Very damaging.
Okay, so that paints the picture at JCP. Automated error, global API blocking, about 3 hours of major pain for Google's infrastructure and apps. But like we said, the reason June 12th felt like the whole internet broke was because of the ripple effect. How did that GCP problem jump over to things like Spotify or Discord?
Yeah, this is where you really see how interconnected everything is now. So many of these big consumer apps, they don't run everything themselves. They build on top of cloud providers like GCP. Maybe their whole application backend lives there. Or they use GCP for databases or user logins or specific API functions.
Got it.
So when GCP has a major problem like this API block, all those services that depend on those APIs, they immediately start failing too. They can't reach the resources they need to work.
And that's why Down Detector lit up like a Christmas tree for so many different apps.
Precisely. Those sudden, sharp spikes across the board. That was the direct symptom of this dependency chain breaking, cascading outwards from the GCP core problem.
Let's walk through some specific examples from the sources. Spotify seemed like one of the biggest ones people noticed.
Oh, absolutely huge impact on Spotify. Tens of thousands of user reports flooded in. People couldn't stream music, obviously, but also couldn't access libraries, search. Basic stuff just didn't work.
Total silence.
Pretty much. Social media was full of it. And crucially, the sources point out that Spotify started working again later that day, and the timing lined up very closely with when Google Cloud reported things were recovering.
Clear link there.
Very clear dependency, yeah.
What about chat apps? Discord was mentioned.
Yep, Discord got hit hard too. Users saw problems with sending attachments, seeing link previews, using activities and servers. Even sending direct messages was unreliable. And Discord's own status updates acknowledged the problem and explicitly linked it to the underlying infrastructure issue that got resolved when GCP came back online.
And Snapchat, too.
Snapchat also had widespread downtime. People couldn't send snaps, couldn't view stories. Again, the timing fit perfectly with the broader GCP and related outages.
I saw Replit mentioned in the developer community section of the reports.
Yeah, Replit, the online coding platform, they were very direct about it. Their status page said they had a wide-ranging outage caused by an upstream cloud provider, and they explicitly named Google Cloud. It knocked out their main website, replit.com, the ability to actually run code projects, their AI features, hosting, even logging in.
Yeah.
Basically stopped developers using their platform cold.
Wow. Work just grinds to a halt. Any other big names affected?
Twitch had identified web issues on their status page, and user reports suggested they were definitely feeling the pain too. And significantly, even AI chatbot services like Character.ai and Claude reported issues. They mentioned a third-party issue causing errors on their APIs and websites.
Right. Shows even the cutting-edge AI stuff relies on this fundamental cloud layer.
Totally. It really underscores how critical cloud is for, well, pretty much everything online now, including advanced AI.
So just to recap that bit, one single automated mistake at GCP set off this chain reaction that hammered services used by millions: music, chat, social media, coding tools, AI assistants, just incredible interconnectedness.
It really is stunning when you see it laid out like that. And yeah, that huge diverse impact is why it felt like the internet itself was offline, even though the actual root cause was more localized within that foundational GCP layer.
Now, you mentioned earlier, and the sources detailed this too, there was a separate issue happening on the very same day at Cloudflare. How did that fit in? Was it connected to GCP?
Yeah, this is important nuance in the reports. Cloudflare, they provide things like content delivery networks, security services, stuff that speeds up and protects websites. They did have their own significant service outage on June 12th.
Okay, so bad luck, or what did Cloudflare say caused their specific problem?
Their explanation, based on the sources, points to a totally different root cause. Their issue was a failure in the underlying storage infrastructure used by our Workers KV service.
Workers KV.
Yeah, it's a distributed data storage system they use internally and also offer to developers. A failure in that storage system caused problems for a bunch of Cloudflare's own services. The list included things like Workers KV itself, Access, their Warp VPN service, gateway security tools, image and stream hosting, Workers AI, their Turnstile CAP-TCHA service, even parts of their main dashboard.
So a specific internal storage problem breaking Cloudflare's own tools. Did they say if there was any connection or overlap with the huge GCP outage happening simultaneously?
So Cloudflare was pretty clear in their analysis that their main outage had this distinct storage-related cause. But, and this is a key detail from the sources, they did acknowledge, a limited number of services at Cloudflare use Google Cloud and were impacted.
Okay. So maybe a compounding factor.
It seems likely. While the big Cloudflare outage was separate, the simultaneous GCP meltdown might have hit a few of their other services that rely on Google infrastructure. Or maybe it just made troubleshooting and recovery even harder on what was already a really bad day for them.
Right. It adds another layer of complexity to why that Thursday felt so universally broken online.
Exactly. Multiple major providers having significant, albeit differently caused, issues at the same time.
What about the other huge cloud players? Amazon Web Services, AWS, and Microsoft Azure, were they down too?
That's another important point the sources make the contrast. AWS, despite some chatter or maybe some confused user reports on Down Detector, firmly denied having any widespread problems. They stated their networks were operating normally, and reports of major AWS outages were not accurate. Their official dashboard stayed green.
Okay.
And similarly, Microsoft Azure didn't report any major simultaneous global outages on June 12th either. Their status pages were clear compared to the alerts coming from GCP and Cloudflare.
So it wasn't like all the big clouds fell over at once?
No, exactly. That's significant. It shows that while cloud is critical, the specific events of that day were concentrated problems primarily at GCP, compounded by a separate issue at Cloudflare, not a total failure across the entire cloud ecosystem.
Okay, pulling all this together now, the GCP root cause, the massive ripple effect, the separate Cloudflare incident. What are the bigger takeaways here? What does this whole episode tell us about, the fragility or maybe the strengths of the internet we have today?
Well, these events, documented in the sources you shared, they're like a perfect real-world illustration of the vulnerabilities baked into our heavily cloud-reliant digital world.
Yeah.
We've put so many eggs in just a few baskets, these massive cloud providers like GCP, AWS, Azure.
Right, centralization.
Yeah, and while they invest fortunes in making things reliable, the sheer scale and complexity mean that sometimes internal glitches like that automated quota mistake at Google or the storage failure at Cloudflare can still trigger these massive widespread consequences.
So even a small internal error can snowball outwards and knock out apps used by millions.
Exactly that. It creates these really critical points of dependency. Maybe not a single server failing, but a failure at a crucial system layer, like API management or core storage, can still cause that cascade. And another thing highlighted is just how hard it is for users, businesses whose apps broke, sometimes even the providers initially, to grasp the full scope immediately.
Yeah.
That's why you saw everyone flocking to Down Detector, just trying to figure out, is it just me, is it the app, or is something bigger going on?
Does this kind of thing spark wider industry conversations? What debates come up after an event like this?
Oh, absolutely. It always brings up the conversation about systemic risk.
Yeah.
Is it too risky to have so much riding on just a few giant companies? People talk about mitigation strategies like multi-cloud, where a business deliberately uses services from, say, both AWS and GCP to avoid putting all their eggs in one basket.
That sounds complicated.
It is. The sources mention that too. Managing multi-cloud setups adds significant complexity and cost. It's not a simple fix. And the other big thing is communication. Incidents like this put huge pressure on the cloud providers for fast, transparent, and accurate communication during an outage. Google mentioning they plan to improve their external communications, as noted in the sources. That's a direct response to this kind of pressure. Users and businesses need to know what's going on.
Okay, so wrapping up the main story then. Thursday, June 12th, 2025, was this massive disruption felt by millions globally, primarily kicked off by that core issue at Google Cloud Platform.
Right, the automated quota update failure.
And then made worse, or at least more confusing, by that separate, simultaneous problem at Cloudflare with their storage system.
Precisely. It was just a really stark, real-time reminder. We get all this amazing convenience and power from cloud computing. It drives almost everything cool online. But that dependency has risks. And the speed that problems can ripple out across Spotify, Discord, Snapchat, all those services, it just highlights the immense ongoing challenge these providers face in keeping everything running perfectly all the time. Which is basically what we expect now.
Yeah, it really makes you stop and think about all the hidden layers keeping our digital lives running, and how sometimes those layers can be surprisingly fragile.
Absolutely. That day really drove home how a problem maybe 2 or 3 steps removed from the app you're actually trying to use can suddenly just make it unusable.
So, building on everything we've unpacked from these sources today, here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. As we rely more and more on digital services, and as those services rely more and more on just a handful of these giant cloud companies, what does the future really look like for making sure this whole interconnected web stays resilient?
Yeah, how do we balance it?
How do we balance the amazing benefits we get from scale and shared infrastructure with these risks that come from having these central points of dependency? And maybe what does real transparency and accountability look like from the companies that are effectively holding up huge chunks of our digital world? Something to think about next time you stream a song, fire off a message, or hit save on that important document without a second thought.